Aegon the Second is a very peculiar character, and for all of his faults that are definitely on full display in House of the Dragon, there's a part of Aegon the Second that is truly just a victim. This video will elaborate on how that is even possible, considering he's been kind of disturbing in his own right. Up until the point that his mother Alicent and grandfather Otto Hightower all but forced him onto the Iron Throne, Aegon did not want it. If you've only been introduced to this character from the HBO series House of the Dragon, you're not missing much. In fact, audiences are likely to find that they're presented with far more depth and nuance to this character than what is available in the source material Fire and Blood. Now, before we get too far, I will say this video will have some spoilers for the show House of the Dragon based on what is available in the source material, and I will elaborate beyond where they're at in the show. But I will not be spoiling anything that is show only beyond the first season, because like you, I've not seen anything beyond season 1. Things may play out differently, but full spoilers for the source material from here on. With that said, this is how Aegon is actually a victim. So to establish this point that Aegon is a victim, I will not be downplaying the heinous acts that we hear about and see, and we'll touch on that along the way. But first thing that we have to point to is the same reason you could argue that Alicent is a victim. And potentially, you can make this argument with anyone. However, with Aegon, I think it's got a unique quality that we'll see he's reluctant to establish power for himself. All the manipulation and scheming of the Hightowers is all to name Aegon king. But that's not exactly saying this is done for his benefit. We are experiencing a political power struggle of values, and Aegon is a symbol more than an actual person. To put Aegon on the Iron Throne establishes the traditional order of things in Westeros. Otto Hightower, and potentially his older brother, show-only name Hobart Hightower, have been pushing for Aegon to sit the Iron Throne since his birth. It's interesting, if you go back to episode 1, Otto was the first to even suggest Rhaenyra as heir. I think you can make the argument that this was a ploy to allow chaos among the Targaryens, ultimately causing conflict among the main Targaryens at the time, Viserys. Daemon, and of course Rhaenyra, you can watch this video for further exploration of this theory, link is in the description. In House of the Dragon, all the way until episode 5 in the first season, Alicent is clearly prepared to accept and even embrace Viserys' decision to have Rhaenyra inherit the Iron Throne. Yet, between Otto and eventually Larys Strong, Rhaenyra's actions in the earlier seasons are used to convince or manipulate Alicent into believing that Aegon must sit the Iron Throne. And it's communicated quite effectively that those Alicent cares for most will have their lives at risk if Rhaenyra were allowed to become ruler of the realm. Once teen Aegon is present in episode 6, this is something that Alicent has fully bought into, and the same fear tactics used by Otto Hightower are now being used by Alicent against her son Aegon. Alicent is convinced that Rhaenyra will kill Aegon and his brothers. She therefore is trying to illustrate to Aegon that his existence alone is a risk unless he's on the Iron Throne. Once you get to episode 8, you can see where Aegon has grown resentful of it all, and he complains that he's done everything that has been asked of him. If you rewind just back to episode 7, he sounds oddly similar to his mother Alicent, who expresses that she too has always done what is expected of her. In the show and in the book after Viserys dies, Aegon very clearly has no intention of taking the crown. He doesn't want it. Jon Snow, somewhere, is blushing. And of course, Aegon is difficult to sympathize with, but let's be fair, he is a sexual predator. And I'm not sure if this will be explored or if there will be any commentary on this, but he seems to be taking his frustration toward his mother out on all women, carelessly fathering bastards, which, hypocritically, is the very thing many use against Rhaenyra as they try to denounce her claim. It's a really bizarre dynamic. Aegon should be demonized for a lot of things, but yet he still maintains a reluctance in becoming a usurper. Unfortunately for the realm, the Green Council convinces him that this is the only way and the right way. Just like his mother before him, he's manipulated into a life he's never demonstrated a desire for. It's truly a tragedy that could eventually be felt by others. Without the pain inflicted upon Alicent and Aegon, perhaps things play out differently. Perhaps they have more compassion for others. Instead, the Green Council and the Hightowers have basically victimized each other into becoming villains from generation to generation as they try to gain more political power. Depending on where you stand, Aegon, like his sister Rhaenyra, are provoked not by personal ambitions, but rather politicking and what is the order of things that eventually boil over into both being responsible for objectively terrible actions. I want to be vague about what we'll inevitably see, but once the Dance of the Dragon starts, it's a terrible family versus family fight to the death. And, as is often the case, those hurt greatest by these actions are the innocent. Very terrible things happen to Aegon that justify his rage towards Rhaenyra. Unbelievably awful things happen towards Rhaenyra that justify her rage toward Aegon. The oddest of this all in House of the Dragon is the two are never really shown to have any type of relationship, which furthers the point that they don't truly know what they're fighting against. It's always second-hand information that manipulates rulers against each other. The saddest part of it all, we see that Aegon never really wanted the crown. Rhaenyra wanted to travel the world on Dragonback with Alicent, according to her in episode 1, so she also never really wanted the crown. Now we're finishing up here, but I can't emphasize this part enough about how large these next coming spoilers will be. I will be fully spoiling the Dance of the Dragons based on the source material. I'm going to speak on it vaguely, but this is your warning. When the war is over and the dust has settled, the majority of the dragons are dead. The majority of the Targaryens are dead. The Iron Throne and the insistence that either Rhaenyra or Aegon sit the Iron Throne started this whole thing. Both of them ultimately lose children, their spouses, and eventually their lives. And if you ask most book fans of who historically are the worst rulers of Westeros, often you'll see both Aegon the Second and Rhaenyra among the worst kings. It wasn't just the royal family dying over political supremacy. Villages were burned. Innocent common folks were murdered because their liege lord supported the wrong ruler. Children were murdered just because of who their parents were, just because of what their bloodline suggested that they'll eventually become when they grow up. The war cost the Targaryens so much so that they really became unrecognizable by the time we see them, obviously past Robert's Rebellion and into the regular part of the story in A Song of Ice and Fire and A Game of Thrones, and then obviously the TV series A Game of Thrones. Again, Aegon is a victim regardless of how gross he was. He didn't want to be king, yet under the false insistence that his life as well as his family's life would be in jeopardy, he accepted the crown, which ironically is the cause of dispute that ignited the war that brought just as much, if not more tragedy than Alicent and Otto had promised if he didn't sit the throne. And that's the main reason I view Aegon the Second, as vile as he is towards women, as a victim in his own right, based on the manipulation he fell victim to from his own mother and grandfather, and ultimately his own Green Council.